The night he found them was not quiet or gentle, it was loud with rain, heavy with guilt, and sharp with the sound of two small bodies shivering on a broken stairwell. A single father already worn thin by life stood frozen under a flickering streetlight, staring at twin 6-year-old girls left behind by the one adult who was supposed to protect them. Their school bags were soaked, their shoes mismatched, and their eyes carried a fear too old for such young faces. In that moment, without knowing why or how, his life split into before and after, because saving them would quietly turn into the miracle that saved him right back. Before the story pulls you deeper, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing the right thing when no one is watching, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to channel name. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that are still waiting to be reminded that goodness exists. He had not planned to be a hero that night. He was just a tired man finishing a late shift, a widower who had learned to carry grief like a permanent ache in his chest. His days were measured in overtime hours and grocery lists, in counting coins before paying bills, and in returning to an apartment that felt too silent after his own child had grown and moved away. He had learned to survive by shrinking his expectations, by not hoping for much, and by telling himself that loneliness was safer than disappointment. That was the rhythm of his life until the rain forced him to slow down and notice what everyone else had walked past. The girls had been left there hours earlier. Their stepmother, overwhelmed and resentful, had decided that responsibility was optional when it became inconvenient. She told herself someone would come, that the world would take care of them, and she drove away without looking back. The twins waited, first with trust, then with confusion, and finally with fear as daylight faded and the cold crept in. They had learned to be quiet, to take up less space, to hope without making noise, and that silence nearly swallowed them whole. When he approached them, his first instinct was fear of involvement. He had been burned before by caring too much, by stepping in when others stepped out. But something in their faces broke through his defenses. It was not just their age or their size, it was the familiar look of being unwanted, of being left behind without explanation. He recognized it because he had worn that same look after his wife died and the world kept moving as if nothing had changed. He could not leave them there, not with that recognition staring back at him. Bringing them home felt unreal. The apartment that had echoed with emptiness suddenly felt too small, too fragile for the weight of what he was taking on. He wrapped them in towels, made soup from whatever he could find, and sat awake all night listening to their uneven breathing as they slept on his couch. There was no plan, no certainty, only a quiet promise forming inside him that whatever came next, they would not be alone again. He told himself it was temporary, just until authorities figured things out, but his heart was already rearranging itself around them. The days that followed were not heroic, they were exhausting. Paperwork, social workers, school calls, and questions he could barely answer piled up faster than he could handle. Money stretched thinner than ever, sleep became a luxury, and self-doubt crept in like a shadow that followed him everywhere. He wondered if love alone was enough, if good intentions could really protect two children from a world that had already failed them once. Every night he lay awake calculating costs, imagining worst-case scenarios, and blaming himself for not being stronger, richer, or more prepared. The twins carried their own storms. They flinched at sudden sounds, hoarded food, and checked the door repeatedly as if expecting to be abandoned again. They smiled often, but it was the kind of smile that asked permission, that waited to be taken back. Healing did not arrive in dramatic moments, it came in small, uneven steps. A shared breakfast without fear. A laugh during homework. A night where they slept through without waking up crying. Each tiny victory felt fragile, like it could break if he celebrated too loudly. Slowly, without him realizing it, they began to change the air in the apartment. Mornings had purpose again. The walls that once felt like they were closing in now echoed with footsteps and movement. He found himself packing lunches, tying shoelaces, and learning the rhythm of bedtime routines. The weight he had carried alone for years shifted, not because it disappeared, but because it was shared. Responsibility, once a burden, became a reason to get up even on days when grief tried to pin him down. There were setbacks that nearly broke him. Legal uncertainty threatened to tear the fragile family apart. Bills piled higher. Exhaustion hollowed him out. More than once, he considered stepping back, telling himself he was not enough for them. But every time he reached that edge, the twins did something small and unremarkable that stopped him cold. They would leave a drawing on his pillow. They would wait up late just to make sure he came home. They would hold his hand in public like it was the safest place in the world. Those moments stitched him back together when he was unraveling. What he did not realize at first was that the girls were not just healing under his care, they were quietly healing him. His grief softened. His loneliness loosened its grip. The apartment no longer felt like a waiting room for a life that had already passed him by. It became a place of becoming. He started cooking real meals again, fixing things he had ignored for years, and even laughing at himself when chaos took over. Love did not erase pain, but it gave it somewhere to rest. Time passed, marked by school projects taped to the fridge and birthdays celebrated with handmade decorations. The twins grew more confident, their fear slowly replaced by curiosity and trust. They stopped asking if they were staying tomorrow and started asking what they would do next week. Stability, once an abstract idea, became something they could touch and rely on. And through it all, he remained unaware of the full truth forming in plain sight. The miracle was not something dramatic or sudden. It was not a single moment of clarity or a life-changing event announced with music swelling in the background. The miracle was ordinary. It was waking up tired but needed. It was coming home to noise instead of silence. It was realizing that his heart, once closed for protection, had reopened without asking permission. Saving the twins had not added something extra to his life, it had returned something essential he thought he had lost forever. When the past finally caught up and the legal dust settled, the fear of losing them returned with brutal force. He prepared himself for heartbreak, braced for the possibility that love would not be enough to keep them together. But something unexpected happened. The same system that often moved too slowly finally saw what mattered. The stability, the care, the visible change in the girls spoke louder than any paperwork. What began as a temporary rescue became a permanent bond. Near the end of this story, if it has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it, and subscribe to channel name. Stories like this live or disappear based on your support, and your engagement helps kindness travel further than we ever could alone. The day he realized the truth, it did not arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly, in a moment so normal it almost passed unnoticed. He watched the twins doing homework at the kitchen table, arguing over colored pencils, completely at ease in a place that once terrified them. And it hit him that they were not just children he had saved. They were the reason he had survived his own grief. They were his everyday miracle, unfolding in small moments he used to overlook. Before the ending, please leave a comment sharing where you are watching from or what part of this story stayed with you the most. Your words matter more than you know. In the end, there was no grand speech, no public recognition, and no reward beyond what truly mattered. A single father who once believed his best years were behind him found purpose where he least expected it. Two little girls who were left behind learned that family is not always the people who bring you into the world, but the ones who refuse to walk away. And somewhere between packed lunches, late-night worries, and quiet mornings, 3 broken stories stitched themselves into one whole life.